In the end, humanity did not conquer the stars with engines of fire and steel. It conquered them with flesh and blood. They faced the infinite, hostile void and chose not to build better ships, but to build better humans. This was their greatest triumph, and it was their most profound, irrevocable sin. To seed the galaxy, they shattered their own soul, sacrificing the very definition of human to survive. The dream of expansion became a silent, creeping nightmare. The children of Earth became true aliens to one another. The 23rd century was an era of cosmic pessimism. The first-generation ships, behemoths of hope launched into the dark, had all failed. Some vanished without a trace. Others sent back fragmented, terrifying final messages. The Fermi paradox was no longer a theory. It was a verdict. The universe was a tomb, and humanity was trapped inside. The Great Silence, they called it. For 112 years, Earth looked to the stars and heard no echo of its own ambition. The fledgling colonies on Mars and Europa were marvels, but they were glorified prisons, forever dependent on their mother world, enclosed under domes of glass and steel, staring out at environments that would kill them in seconds. The species had reached the edge of its cradle and found it was a cage. That is when the Chroma Code was born, a project of such radical audacity it was first dismissed as madness. Its premise was simple and utterly terrifying. If humanity could not change the heavens, it would have to change itself. It would rewrite its own source code, tailoring new forms of human life designed to thrive where the original model would perish. The first children of the code were destined for Kepler 186f, a super-Earth with gravity 1.4 times that of home. A paradise of alien flora, crushed under a sky that felt like a physical weight. Here, baseline humans would have their bones splintered and their organs fail. For this world, they designed the Titans. The Titan genome was a masterpiece of biological architecture. Their skeletons were woven with carbon nanotubes, granting a density and tensile strength that laughed at the crushing gravity. Their musculature was hypertrophied, their circulatory systems reinforced with dual-chambered hearts that beat with slow, powerful thuds, like geological events. They were giants, but they paid a steep price for their strength. The gravity that was their birthright also shaped their minds. Their thoughts became slow, deliberate, and immovable as mountains. They valued stability above all else, viewing the frenetic energy and fleeting passions of their ancestors with a kind of weary pity. They were no longer Homo sapiens. They were Homo gigantus. Next came the ocean moon of Pantheon, a world of eternal, global seas under a permanent crust of ice 2 miles thick, a place of absolute darkness, unimaginable pressure, and no sky. For this crushing, lightless abyss, the Chroma Code gave birth to the Abyssals. They were sleek, elegant beings, their bodies designed for hydrodynamic perfection. They had no need for lungs, their skin a semi-permeable membrane that extracted oxygen directly from the water. Their eyes were huge, silvery orbs, capable of perceiving the faintest traces of bioluminescence, the only light that ever touched their world. But the true implication was far stranger. The Abyssals developed a form of sonar so advanced, it became their primary language. A constant stream of clicks, echoes, and pressure waves that painted a three-dimensional picture of their world directly into their minds. They lived in a state of perpetual, shared consciousness with their kin. The concept of I began to dissolve, replaced by the oceanic certainty of we. The Titans were built for gravity, the Abyssals for pressure. The engineers of the Chroma Code grew bolder, their ambitions swelling with each success. They had conquered worlds of rock and water. But before they could claim the true expanse of the cosmos, one final hurdle remained: the raw, lethal vacuum of space itself. For this, they created their most extreme, most alien children, the Voidkin, beings born not for a world, but for the unforgiving emptiness between them. They were humanity's final, desperate leap into the unknown, a species designed to call the star-dusted void their home. The biology of a Voidkin was more crystalline silicon than carbon. They had no need to breathe, metabolizing cosmic radiation directly through their translucent skin. They could hibernate for centuries during interstellar transit, their minds operating on timescales that would seem like an eternity to their planetary cousins. Their very thoughts were alien. Without sound or air, they evolved to communicate through focused beams of polarized light and subtle quantum entanglement, a language of pure mathematics and raw data. Emotion, as baseline humans understood it, was an inefficient data packet they had long since discarded. For 300 years, the Great Expansion unfolded in silence. The three new species of humanity, each perfectly adapted to their domain, thrived. They built civilizations of staggering scale and beauty. Titan cities were carved into the very bones of their mountains. Abyssal colonies were living coral networks, pulsing with the soft light of a million souls. The Voidkin wove habitats from captured asteroids and stellar light. The dream was achieved. Humanity was no longer confined to a single, fragile world. It was a galactic presence. Yet, an unnerving quiet settled over the fledgling empire. The children of Earth had grown up in separate houses, and they no longer spoke the same language. The profound biological and psychological chasms carved by the chroma code had become too wide to cross. Attempts at reunification were disastrous. Titan ambassadors suffered from vertigo and crippling anxiety in the 1G gravity of human ships, their minds unable to process the frantic pace of human speech. Abyssal delegates, removed from their collective consciousness, experienced a profound sensory deprivation that drove them to madness, a condition their neurologists termed ego shock. And the Voidkin, they simply did not come. They saw no value in it. To them, planetary existence, the cycle of day and night, the prison of gravity, the messy chaos of atmosphere, was a primitive state to be transcended, not revisited. They had embraced the purity of the void, and looked back on their terrestrial origins as a caterpillar might look back on its chrysalis. The shared history became myth. The concept of Earth became a half-forgotten legend, a different story told in three tongues that could no longer understand one another. For the Titans, it was a place of impossible fragile weakness. For the Abyssals, it was the great solitude, a horror of individual isolation. For the Voidkin, it was simply the gravity well, a statistical anomaly from which they had escaped. The silence between the stars was no longer empty. It was filled with the tension of a family that had grown so far apart, they had forgotten they were ever related. And it is in such silence that suspicion and fear begin to breed. The first sign of the coming storm appeared without warning in the skies above Gigantus, the capital world of the Titan hegemony. It was a Voidkin harvester vessel, a kilometer-long shard of obsidian that moved with an unnatural grace, utterly silent. It did not answer hails. It broadcast no identification. It simply moved into a low, stable orbit and began a meticulous, high-resolution scan of the planet's crust, its purpose a complete and terrifying mystery. To the Titans, a species that valued stability and territory above all, this was an intolerable intrusion, an act of aggression so profound it defied comprehension. They had spent centuries carving their civilization into the rock of this world, a world they had earned through their own engineered flesh. This silent, spectral ship from their ghost-like cousins was a violation. The defense platforms of Gigantus, weapons capable of cracking continents, locked onto the alien vessel. The Titan High Command issued a single, final ultimatum, broadcast on all frequencies, a deep, resonant roar of pure sonic power that was their word for withdraw. The ship in orbit did not respond. It did not move. It simply continued its cold, silent work. The great dream of expansion had fractured into the silent, looming threat of the first interstellar war fought between brothers. With a final, strained breath, the Titan officer slammed his hand down on the panel. The command was given. The war would begin. But the silent ship in orbit did not wait to be fired upon. And it did not fire back. It fractured, its obsidian hull blooming open like a monstrous geometric flower. From its core, it released not missiles or energy beams, but thousands upon thousands of smaller, needle-like drones. They descended upon Gigantus like a swarm of metallic locusts, ignoring the cities, the armies, the charging defense platforms entirely. The Titan Command Center watched in stunned disbelief. The drones weren't weapons of war. They were drills, extractors. They plunged deep into the planet's crust, bypassing veins of precious metals and energy sources, homing in on something else with terrifying precision. But what were they after? Why risk interstellar war, not for conquest, but for rocks? The horrifying truth was revealed not by an ultimatum, but by a cold, data-rich transmission from the Voidkin swarm, sent directly into the Titan network. It wasn't a declaration of war, it was an inventory list. The Voidkin hadn't come to fight them, they had come to harvest them. Centuries of living in the hard radiation of the void had brought an unforeseen consequence. A slow, inexorable decay of their own chroma code. A digital plague they called the static corruption. Their own genetic perfection had become a fragile prison, and they were dying. They saw the Titans, with their robust, geologically integrated biology, not as cousins but as a fallow field, a source of raw, stable genetic material needed to repair their own failing code. They weren't invaders, they were farmers. This act of ultimate violation, of reducing a civilization to a biological resource, sent a shockwave through the system, and it was felt. Miles deep in the lightless oceans of their own world, the collective consciousness of the abyssals recoiled. They did not see the ships or hear the broadcasts. They felt the spike of violent intent as a tear in the quantum foam, a psychic scream of a sibling trying to consume another. For the first time in centuries, their perfect, silent communion was shattered by a singular, alien emotion they had almost forgotten: fear. The dream of humanity was over. The nightmare had just begun, but it wasn't the nightmare anyone had expected. In the deep, the abyssals did more than just recoil. Their fear was a catalyst, a focusing lens for their vast, unified consciousness. They reached out, not with ships, but with thought itself, casting a psychic net across the void to understand the source of the pain. And what they found was a lie wrapped in a horrifying truth. Tapping into the Voidkin data stream, they saw the static corruption. It wasn't a disease. It was a metamorphosis. The Voidkin weren't decaying. They were shedding. This wasn't a harvest for survival. It was a final, terrible ritual. But what does a species that has mastered the void want to become? What is the final stage of an evolution that despises flesh and blood? The answer is a form of ascension, a final, horrifying escape from the prison of causality. The Voidkin did not need the Titan's genetic code to repair themselves. They needed it as an anchor, a stable, physical counterweight to their own existence, a biological key they could turn to unlock the cage of reality itself. The abyssals showed the Titans the truth. This was not an invasion. It was a suicide, a transfiguration. The Voidkin were using the deep, terrestrial stability of their cousins as a launchpad to jettison themselves from the universe as a physical presence, to become something else entirely. The Titans watched, their weapons charged but useless, their entire philosophy of strength and permanence rendered meaningless. How do you wage war on a species whose only goal is to cease to exist? The drones rejoined the fleet, their mission complete. The black, geometric ships in orbit did not power up weapons or raise shields. Instead, they began to drift together, their hard edges softening and merging like ink drops in water. The fleet was becoming one entity, a single vast cathedral of void stuff preparing for its final service. Through the abyssal link, the Titans and the viewers could feel the Voidkin's final thoughts. Not malice, not victory, but a profound and chilling sense of relief. They were shedding their last chains, their ships, their bodies, their very memory of being human. They were purifying themselves down to a single, final concept. On Gigantus, the Titan High Commander slowly lowered his hand from the firing panel, his face a mask of awe and terror. All the might of his world, all their centuries of building and fighting, was like a child shaking a fist at a hurricane. There was no sound, no shockwave. It was an eruption of pure concept. A silent wave of transformation washed over the patch of space where the fleet had been. The laws of physics buckled and reformed in an instant. The Voidkin were gone. In their place, something new had been born. A stable, shimmering, impossible nebula that pulsed with the cold, clear light of pure mathematics. They had not traveled to another star. They had become the sky itself. The war was over. The great schism of humanity was complete. One branch had bound itself to stone, to permanence, and to the gravity of a single world. One had dissolved into the silent, psychic sea of its home ocean. And the last, in their hatred for the flesh, had become an idea made manifest in the heavens. 3 futures, born from a single past. The dream of a united humanity was dead, but in its place, 3 new, terrifying, and beautiful realities had just begun. The story of what we are is finite. The story of what we can become is not. To continue exploring the furthest reaches of imagination and the future of everything, subscribe to SynthetixScape.